How would you like to turn back the clock? Really turn it back. Like on facial aging, for instance, or your tone, your muscles, your bones. Maybe not go back to your 20s. Maybe keep the experience and the wisdom that you've got, but turn back a little bit on the body that you might have. Well, you're in luck if you said yes to any of that. My guest is going to share his conviction. You'll hear it in his voice. I definitely did. And about his voice, what I'd love for you to do is during the beginning of the podcast, really think about if someone said, you have to guess his age, what would it be? Because he reveals it about halfway through, a little more than halfway. And I was surprised because it is not what I thought. But my friends, that too is related to what we're talking about today. Your vocal cords change as you age, or not. I'm Deborah Atkinson. You're listening to Flipping 50, where I address your top struggles and concerns, and let's just hope your hopes and your dreams. And I share what to eat, how to move, and how to change your mindset so that you can have the energy and the vitality that you want, need, and deserve in the second and better half. This episode is brought to you by my 5-day flip. If you are doing all the things, you're exercising, you're doing the strength training, you are doing interval training, you think you're eating healthy, not what we were taught when we were 20, but actually the new fangled hormone balancing, eating healthy. And still, you've got a little extra weight, a little extra belly fat, or just simply no energy. You need to start or a restart. Try this. Treat it as a reset. It is 5 days where, you'll still be moving regularly, but you may find that because you're doing less exercise with me, you have more energy. And you give yourself the opportunity to see what does exercise that is complementary to what you did yesterday and what you're going to do tomorrow. What does that feel like? What does it feel like when the exercise is a gift, not a punishment? I'll put the link in the show notes and it'll be there. And know this, if you are set, your exercise is working, you love it, and the energy that you have, share it with a friend because it is you and I who inspire the rest of the world to fitness as well. Let's dive in. My guest today is Dr. Stephen Petteruti. And let me tell you, I practiced that before we started, just so y'all know. We're going to call him Dr. Steve. An honors English graduate from Tufts University, Dr. Stephen Petteruti continued on to medical school to become family practice physician. In 2014, with a holistic, patient-centered approach, Dr. Steve launched Intellectual Medicine 120, offering concierge medical services, functional medicine, facial anti-aging treatments, and I'm going to be nailing him on that one, and advanced techniques to manage the body's aging process. His next step was to bring the science of cellular health to Intellectual Medicine 120 with the addition of IV Vitamin Infusions in a state-of-the-art, relaxing environment offering chelation therapy, high-dose vitamin C for cancer clients, and lifestyle drips. Along with his wife, Shannon, he's the founder of the DRIPBaR Centers for IV Vitamin Therapy. And Dr. Steve, thanks so much for being here today.
It's a delight. Thanks for having me. And great job with the name, by the way.
All right. Well, and I think we should talk about just a little of what we spoke about in the green room before we actually turn on the recording, because as we're recording, it happens to be, audience, the Monday after the 2021 Super Bowl. And the comment was, or actually our comments came from my question about how much did you love that the 42-year-old quarterback won the Super Bowl. It was his 10th Super Bowl. He's looking forward to coming back again, and what your comments were about that. So maybe we should do a quick recap.
Love to. Yeah, I watched the game. We celebrated every touchdown. We're New Englanders. We love the Patriots and Tom Brady. But what I love about what he does for your listeners, for me, and for you is he's breaking stereotypes. He's pushing boundaries. Who says a certain age has to declare the end of a pursuit of something you love? Tom Brady is showing us, as others have before him, the limits of a human body's capabilities when properly nourished, when properly treated. Now, these guys do an important service to us, right? They push boundaries. They're sort of human experiments. So Tom Brady's high athletic performance, I find it really inspiring, informative, and as we spoke of in the green room, there's a cautionary element for the listeners to discriminate. There is athletic performance. In other words, I want to play quarterback in the NFL. Or for a listener, maybe it's I want to run a 10K or I want to do a marathon. Those are athletic pursuits. They're a little different than what it takes to live a long lifespan. So I always counsel, my patients, don't feel obliged to train at supreme levels if the goal is simply to live healthy and long. If you want to play tennis and be great at it, you got to train like an athlete. If you want to live a long life, it's a slightly different approach involved, and it doesn't necessarily impose that kind of hardship. But I love what Tom Brady did. I'm looking forward to next year. My prediction, this is being recorded, so I have to hold up to it. It's going to be the New England Patriots versus Tampa Bay in the Super Bowl next year.
Wow.
That'll be
Okay.
exciting. Anyhow.
I'm coming back for you, buddy. Okay. All right. So I'm going to dive right in because I've got you here and you literally are a captive audience for my listeners who really are very interested in this next question. So I'm going to get really specific. At what age, is there a specific age, women or men should consider starting hormone replacement therapy?
Yes, there is. So two different thresholds. One is at the onset of symptoms that can't otherwise be managed. Now, you do great things because I've listened to some of your work guiding folks through hormonal balance with nutrition and health and fitness. Those folks are foundational. You can't leapfrog past that to go to the next level, which is your hormone replacement. And I will say, every human being needs to replace their hormones at some point, or they're going to suffer consequences. So the age at which they should start is the beginning of symptoms. The primary symptoms I see in women are brain fog, fatigue, diminished libido, and mid-abdominal weight gain, sometimes depressed mood. And these herald, in many cases, the leading edge of the perimenopausal phase of life. And I've seen it hit women as young as their 30s. Most commonly, they're still menstruating. And that's an important detail. When menstruating, you will enter into your perimenopause. And the best time to start your hormonal therapy is sooner than later. Because by the time you cease menstruating, a woman's already lost 20% of her bone mass in the absence of an intervention. So that's one threshold, beginning of symptoms. The other, well, for men, the symptom complex usually comes a bit later. And most commonly, it's heralded by a libido dysfunction, diminished sex drive, again, the mood disorder, irritability, short-tempered, a cognitive impairment, a bit of a brain fog where the speed of recall is diminished. Word finding can be affected. They'll not quite be able to snap to statistics as quickly, subtle changes, and even affecting confidence. And these are attributes of the neurotransmitter benefit of testosterone in particular. Now, what about somebody who doesn't have any symptoms at all? In the realm of anti-aging, I recommend considering it by age 50 for women and by age 60 for men. Even if they come to me and they say, but doc, I feel great, everything's perfect, why would I intervene? And I'll say, well, how did the guy feel on the ice right before it broke? Warm and dry. We know what comes next. Our goal in anti-aging medicine is to literally change the way we age. We want our listeners to be the Tom Bradys of aging, the ones who do it differently. As healthy as their grandparents and parents may have been, we're literally talking about aspiring toward that 120-year lifespan. Well, if you're going to do that, you don't want to get old doing it. So those are the thresholds to look for.
Love it. And I'm going to take a slightly side question here. And I'm going to stumble through it just a little bit because I think it's important enough for me to ask. And I honestly, this is literally no accident. There are no accidents. The woman I was speaking with right before we jumped on to do this recording is suffering from, and suffering is not a wonderful word either, but 3 years ago, she lost a young adult son to a drunk driver. And we were discussing where she is right now and where she is in regard to menopause and whether she's doing HRT. And I'd love to get your thoughts about, a pandemic for any listener who had additional stressors, during this past year, or a situational, life event that puts you in a position where legitimately so. There are reasons why depression or anxiety may be more your present status. Does that potentially to you increase the, I don't want to say need, I think I want to say the benefit of doing hormone therapy?
Yes to both, and condolences to your client. That is just an awful life event. But herein lies a real problem in medicine. Take your patient, your client. Oftentimes, life events are starting to impose on us concurrent with midlife perimenopause for women. In men, we call it the andropause. Yep. Whereby our children are getting older, calamities may befall them, or they may just be going away to college. Our parents are aging and dying, and they're sick. We have career shifts. And we look at these external stimuli and we say, well, no wonder why I'm not sleeping. No wonder why I'm irritable. No wonder why my libido is off. Look at what's going on. The missing piece is looking at the resilience intrinsic to the person. When the hormones are replete and their body's in balance, their resilience is better. The stimuli is still there, Deb. The horrible thing is horrible, but your ability to process it is better. Now, here's where I believe conventional medicine is way off on the wrong trail, and we need to pull people away from that trail. A woman of, let's say, 45 presents with symptoms of fatigue, poor sleep, libido dysfunction, maybe a little depression, is put on 10 or 15 pounds. Goes to the doc and says, here's what I'm feeling. The doc says, I think you're depressed. I see this all the time in my practice. Puts them on an antidepressant, serotonin reuptake inhibitors, Prozac, Celexa, escitalopram, etc. These drugs, in my view, should be rarely used and with great caution. Once started, they're enormously hard to come off of. They cause weight gain and libido dysfunction in many people. So now you've taken a woman suffering these consequences and you made her gain weight and lose her orgasm. How does that help anybody, right? What their body's crying out for is hormonal repletion. So you get that patient at that time of life. And sometimes the compounding of hormonal fading along with life events can expose the symptoms. And particularly as they get into a sleep disruption, and that starts to muck up everything from cortisol to growth hormone, and you get caught in this negative vortex. You're starting to not sleep well. The growth hormone levels are depleting. Your sex hormones are depleting, and they play off one another. And if you don't peel out of it, this becomes your new normal. And I've heard patients told by their doctor, this is what it's like. Get used to it. You may be familiar with I think it's the North American Menopause Society. It's a group who has a philosophy opposed to that which I espouse and many anti-aging experts espouse. They look at hormonal therapy for women as something that should be used transiently just to nurture them through their menopause, get them through a few hot flashes, and then stop them altogether. That, Deb, makes no sense at all, right? Look at your patients suffering through these consequences. Unlike other sort of glands in our body, the ovaries and the gonads, the testicles in men, they're designed to fail. We are designed to be born, grow to maturity, reproduce, and then what comes next? Death. So there's no genetic selective pressure on our species to continue to manifest great health after we've reproduced. It's a natural order. Well, that may be the natural order, but I don't want to sign up for that, right? We have a
Right.
frontal lobe so we can think through other ways to approach it. So sustaining hormonal health, once implemented, becomes a lifelong endeavor. And people ask me, well, when should I stop my hormonal support?
Hmm.
And my answer is when they close the lid. That's when you stop.
Love it. That's probably one or among the top five questions that I'm asked by women. And I love that you've clarified your answer. And thank you for walking down that path in response, because so very important. But I got to ask a follow-up question, because this one also comes. So those women who are wondering about it, loving it, romanced by it, this will stop them. So we've unpacked this one with other experts on Flipping 50, and I'd love your opinion. Does hormone therapy increase risk of breast cancer for women and or prostate cancer for men?
Yeah, my answer to both is that the weight of evidence doesn't support increased risk in either realm. And there's a historical reason why women, look, there's been two generations now of women in particular who have been sacrificed due to misinterpretation of studies. The Women's Health Initiative, published in the 1990s, had the headline, hormones cause breast cancer. Now, breast cancer is one of the most horrifying cancers women can get. It strikes a very intimate organ at a very young time in life for most. And it is pandemic in America, not because people are on hormones. It's pandemic because of our toxic diet, our toxic environment. I know you talk a lot about obesity. Obesity is one of the leading causes of cancer, including breast cancer. I mean, if you're a non-smoker and you're overweight, that's your number one cancer trigger. Right behind it is, we talked a moment ago about cancers being environmental. Well, tomorrow we can't go out and clean up the earth, but we can affect our internal environment. At Intellectual Medicine and at the DRIPBaR, we do testing for lead and cadmium, total body load. It's called a provocative urinary test. So we can determine how much toxic metals accumulated in your body. That helps us to make a plan to diminish them. That's a trigger for cancer. So back to your question. The Women's Health Initiative, even then in the 1990s, estrogen was not associated with increased breast cancer risk at all. Never was. No studies ever correlated that I'm aware of. And I've read many of them, if not all. The hormone that was correlated with increased breast cancer risk is medroxyprogesterone, an artificial form of progesterone. A few years later, in 2007, there's a study that came out called the Fournier study, where they broke down different hormones for women and looked at the correlation with breast cancer. And they found a variable correlation, specifically finding that bioidentical estrogen and progesterone did not correlate with an increased risk. More recently published studies looking again at that Women's Health Initiative have shown a negative correlation with estrogen therapy, not at all correlating with breast cancer risk. So we have to look at it in the broad picture. What happens to women if they don't go on hormones? What are women most likely to die from? Answer: heart disease. Hormonal therapy correlates with improvement long-term in cardiovascular outcomes. What do women fear? What do people fear? Women are at a greater risk of dementia. And there's a correlation between low hormones and increasing dementia. The longer women are on hormones, the less their risk of dementia. Another thing that happens to women more than men, they shrink, their bones thin. Women should never break a hip. This should be rare. The fact that it's common and that we don't react to it vigorously is neglect of a preventable entity. So you've got bone thinning, cognitive decline, cardiac risk. You've got muscle wasting, sarcopenia, right? The hormone that I give women first is testosterone. That is the first hormone that they would often benefit from. In many cases, that hormone is given alone because the body can aromatize it. It can convert some of that into estrogen. Now, testosterone is wonderful for women in the right dose, right? They're not going to grow beards. They're not going to change voice. Properly dosed, testosterone therapy can be life-changing for women even at a young age. And I maintain that there's a There's a streak of sexism running through medicine that neglects women's physical, mental, and sexual health. When I do a lab test for testosterone level, one of the labs that I use has a normal level of testosterone for women starting at 0. That's impossible. And yet that's what the lab posts. So this is why if your listeners are interested in this, they do need to find a nurse practitioner or a physician who's well trained in the use of bioidentical hormones, because you don't learn this stuff in medical school or residency. This is postgraduate anti-aging focus. So the fear of breast cancer is real. The cause of it goes way beyond hormonal therapy. But here's an important detail. The philosophy of regret comes into bear. Everybody gets to choose how they want to manage aging. Once upon a time, Deb, you didn't have to make this decision. There were no choices. But now every listener is going to have to contemplate, am I going to go down door number 1, the sort of traditional aging pathway, or door number 2, repleting hormones and doing other things to keep myself young? So let's imagine a listener goes down the hormone pathway. They might get breast cancer. It may have nothing to do with the hormones. It's just because things can still happen. You do not want to go down that pathway if you'll bear regret afterward. Conversely, if you don't go down that pathway and you suffer vaginal atrophy and libido dysfunction and your bones thin and you break a hip and then you get breast cancer, you may say, son of a gun, I should have done it. Now, I'll use myself as an example. I'll be 62 in May. I started this when I was 48 and I felt effects of aging. And I've been on testosterone since then, along with just about everything else that one can do for anti-aging. And Shannon asked me once, if you knew you were dying, would you regret anything? It's a fair question. Suppose I get prostate cancer. Suppose I get a heart disease. I would live with comfort because I know the science and I know that I didn't bring the roof on my head by virtue of the decisions I made. And that's the part that I encourage individuals to listen to your podcast, to gain information, to go to the website. Unlike other clinicians, I support patients doing their own research. It's a beautiful time to be able to get your own information direct from the sources. Then make your decision and be at peace. So it's a long answer to a direct question. The short answer is that in my view, based upon the research that I've done, the bulk of evidence does not support prostate cancer being increased by, and by the way, it's not just me. In 2015, the Prague conference gathered experts from all over the world in andrology, the study of testosterone in men. And they concluded, along with them was Dr. Abraham Morgentaler, the author of the book Testosterone for Life, and my good friend Dr. Martin Miner, another expert in andrology. They concluded that the weight of evidence did not support increased heart disease risk or prostate cancer risk in men on testosterone. So there's a growing consensus of us in the anti-aging community that that the benefits far outweigh the risks.
Love it. And I have to comment on this. So your voice, had I had to, so just so listeners, we've never seen each other face to face. We've never met. I imagine at some point in the future when, yes, we will actually see people again, we will cross paths. But had I had to guess your age from your voice, I would not have guessed 62. I probably would have guessed closer to 48. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, appreciate that. And I've seen your picture, and you've got youthful energy as well. But this is a beautiful thing, is it not? I mean, I get up every day, and I feel like I'm 40. I've had 12 knee surgeries from my days of playing collegiate football, and I was told 20 years ago I would need knee replacements. I'm keeping my knees, thank you. I've rehabilitated them. I play volleyball. Shannon and I are in a league. Well, we're in the league. We're the worst team in the league. Being anti-aging doesn't make you good at sports. Just say that, but it's a beautiful way to live. It's fun. I like what my body can do for me. We only get to walk through this path once, and I want to stay young. What we call the rectangular lifespan. It's a term referring to dying at an advanced age in the prime of our life. This notion that we have to age before death is one that we're blowing up.
Mm. What a great statement. I'm going to let that sink in with listeners just for a second. All right. But I do want to talk about, especially now. So, this month being Heart Health Month, you talk about avoiding the big three, including heart disease, cancer, and dementia, in order to extend the healthy lifespan. So, what are the most important things that you believe listeners can do beyond healthy living to avoid these chronic diseases and preserve their youth?
Right. So foundationally, you start out with the things that you always talk about, uh, thoughtful nutrition. Now, I've heard many people say, I eat pretty healthy, or they'll say, I eat less than other people. Look, folks, this is America. We are the fattest country in the world at the most obese time in the history of Homo sapiens. We don't have a pandemic of COVID as much as we do a consequence of chronically ill and vulnerable people. So step number one, keep your percent body fat in check. If you're a woman, aspire to around 30%. If you're a man, around 20. And it varies depending on your body type. We're not all born with the same shape. The next piece is modest exercise. The idea that you've got to pound it and go real hard and go real long, not necessarily the case. There is a U-shaped curve, we call that, in medicine with regard to training, meaning that no training is bad for you. Severe, intense training can actually cause harm. And there's a study showing an increase in adverse cardiac consequences when people train super hard. You have to know what you're doing if you're at that level to replete the antioxidants that are needed. So the exercise piece. Now, I'm a firm advocate of chelation therapy. When I look at the literature and the research, and this is something, folks, I want them to tune in on chelation. It's misunderstood, it's underappreciated, and it's neglected by mainstream medicine just out of ignorance. Lead is ubiquitous. The average American, the average person in developed society has a lead level 1,000 times above natural levels, equivalent to that of ancient Romans. Why is that important? Because lead gets buried in bones and in tissue. You can't test it in the blood because it's not there anymore. It's like looking at a highway at 2 a.m. and wondering where the cars are, right? They're all in the parking lot. The parking lot for lead is bone and connective tissue. When it's in your body, it's corrosive to the arteries. It's correlated with increased blood pressure, heart disease, cognitive decline. So I feel that people should aspire to get their total body heavy metal tested and then make chelation, intravenous chelation, a part of their anti-aging health support lifestyle. That's not currently available to everybody. Shannon is working hard to fix that problem. DRIPBaR is now a national franchise that she's rapidly expanding so that it will be accessible to just about everybody in the country in a couple of years. So infusion therapy, percent body fat, the lead rots the brain. When it comes to nutritional guidance, percent body fat leads the way. Eating clean, avoiding pesticides, these things are super critical. But if you eat organic, pesticide-free food, but your percent body fat's 45, you got issues that need to be addressed. As far as oral supplements go, I take vitamin D on a regular basis. The threshold for vitamin D is moving, and in our realm, the anti-aging realm, we aspire to a level of 50 nanogram per deciliter. So when people get vitamin D levels tested, it's one of the vitamins worth testing in the blood. I also use other supplements, including pregnenolone and DHEA. But these are things that are available. The layers of anti-aging. Number one, percent body fat. Number two, replace hormones when needed. And then number three, regular use of chelation therapy to diminish toxic heavy metals. And let's presume already, Deb, that these are folks that are eating thoughtfully, that have a reason to exist, and that keeps brain, body, and spirit preserved. They have communities of people that they connect with in healthy relationships. This is a horrible time for all of the above because of the pandemic lockdown. Yeah. But we need to get back into living life. And for your listeners, I know this is part of their vital essence of being, is staying connected to others. So So yeah, let's all connect with each other and develop reinforcing behaviors that keep us all young.
Love it. Love, love, love. Okay. Now, there's a term that floats around that I know you know very well, but my listeners are less familiar with. So, first of all, could you define the term somatopause and then discuss your opinion regarding the use of growth hormone for health support and anti-aging? And I gotta tell you, as a side note, so my listeners are so used to hearing me talk not anti-aging but pro-aging, so it's hard for me to have that roll off my tongue.
Yeah, yeah. I get you. You know, it's two different adjectives talking about the same thing, right?
Exactly.
What we're
Yeah,
talking about is
but I'd
pro-aging.
like to be right, so
Yeah,
just
I am. Um, I'm pro-aging, right? I want to age chronologically. I want to be on the planet well past 100. Um, there's a wonderful cliche in medicine, and I've had to face this. As you could tell, I'm not a conventional doc, and I've had to bear under some feedback from docs who have differing opinions than the one I possess. And it's been said, you know, how do you convince other doctors that that you're right and they're wrong? And the answer is, well, you wait for them to die. So they'll never they'll never alter a well entrenched opinion, no matter how many facts are thrown in their way. So that's not entirely true, by the way. There are docs out there that are real intellects and are real progressive thinkers. But I will say this: conventional medicine gets a little prickly when you encroach on what they perceive to be their turf. And when patients approach their doctor with contrary opinion, if any listener goes to their doctor, unless their doctor is an enlightened progressive thinker and says, Doctor, what do you think about hormone therapy? The doctor's likely to rear up on their hind legs, bristle, and say, I'll give you cancer. No, don't, because they're just espousing the party line. It takes time, energy, and study to get into all these details that I'm sharing with you. Nowadays, doctors don't have any of the above. They have been incorporated, vertically integrated. Their time has been taken from them. And you guys know what I'm talking about. You go see your doctor today, and they'll spend as much time staring at the computer as talking to you. So it's really altered the way that information can be gathered and disseminated. So anyhow, we're talking about somatopause. Um, Somatopause refers to the phase of life where growth hormone starts to drop off in a way that affects our youthful vitality.
Mhm.
Growth hormone emanates from the pituitary gland out of the brain. It is a restorative hormone. It's probably ill named. If we thought of that as regenerative hormone, it'd be a better way to frame it. We have it throughout our life. As we age, it becomes less prominent, less of it. If you don't sleep properly, and I know sleep is really a cornerstone, sleep hygiene, avoiding the lifestyles that are corrosive to your sleep, that's when your body creates most of its growth hormone. So you can have premature consequence from growth hormone failure. But even if you do everything perfectly, somewhere after the age of 60, the growth hormone levels really take a hit. And as they drop, your immune system wanes with it because the growth hormone keeps the thymus gland functional. The thymus gland makes T cells. That's part of your immune defense. There's a term for that. It's called immunologic senescence, where the immune system fades. Why do old people get infected? Why do they get cancer? Immune system failure. So we replete it nutritionally: zinc, vitamin D, the healthy lifestyle, the exercise you espouse, absolute cornerstones. Now, should you use growth hormone? That is highly controversial and it's still being studied. But I will share this with you and your listeners. If you're going to do this, find an expert. Do not do this online, people, please. I've had folks come to me with little vials. This is true. A little vial of powder. I say, what you got? Well, I got this growth hormone. I bought it online. You can get anything online. Growth hormone can accelerate aging and do damage to your brain if used inappropriately at the wrong time of life. There's hardly a person under the age of 60 who will benefit from growth hormone except for in very extreme circumstances. Then, if you give your body growth hormone at the wrong time, you will destroy your brain's ability to make its own growth hormone and potentially harm your longevity and your vitality. The notion out there that growth hormone is some fountain of youth hormone is profoundly misleading. There's a lot more to it than that. Now, on the other side of that coin, as you age, as you go into the 60s, in my practice, I start to study the levels of growth hormone and contemplate the risk benefit. In most cases, instead of using growth hormone, we use peptides to stimulate the pituitary to release more of its own growth hormone. At the same time, you've got to have the nutritional matrix and the healthy sleep to make it all work. Here's another mistake folks sometimes make. They will invest in things like hormones and online anti-aging programs ahead of quitting smoking and just exercising, right? You can't put the cart before that horse. So I find growth hormone a fascinating topic and field. I caution your listeners not to embrace it, nor to go online to do any hormonal therapy. If you don't have an expert you can sit down and chat with, then find one before you walk down that path. But I do think growth hormone has a role to play in anti-aging, particularly when we're looking at the folks 60, 70, 80, that age. But as you continue in your work, you'll have Flipping 60. You're going to have other flipping shows, aren't you? We got to keep flipping.
Well, I've just had this conversation very recently in a podcast. So I have people asking all the time, well, what about us flipping 60? But here's the point. And actually, I'd love for you to weigh in on this.
Yeah.
So you can let me know if I'm out in left field. But the majority of those big shift and changes will happen for women as they're flipping 50. I have so many just different ways that you can take flipping 50. And that is really flipping the second half. So it's, first of all, between the ears, flipping your expectation about what this is and needs to be. And we started there talking about Tom Brady. Yep. But it's also the fact that, honestly, women who are potentially right at 50 or, closer to the average age, at least when menopause happens. That doesn't mean it happens for everybody there. Yep. But that a woman at 60, she's actually adapted to the change in hormones. And she doesn't necessarily need much different exercise prescription or lifestyle change than a woman at 50 does.
Well said. As an amateur weight training athlete at 62, the differences are in rest cycle recovery. So you're right. 50 is a fulcrum age, and philosophically, it's a fulcrum age. And we know from studies that starting early is profoundly beneficial. However, it's never too late, folks. I don't care if you're 85. I have a patient in my practice. I love this woman. Came to me at age 84, Deb. 84. Came in because she'd fallen and broken her neck. She gained 30 pounds. She was using a walker, having trouble getting around. She has 9 children now. She said, I want to keep up with my grandchildren. I said, okay, there's no reason, no medical, biological, or cellular reason to deprive a person of the potential benefit of all of the attributes of anti-aging therapy, including hormonal treatment. We started her on hormonal therapy, including testosterone, at 84. We put her into our weight loss program, which is nutritional behavioral change, sometimes use of supplements. 6 months later, she lost 30 pounds of fat. She got rid of her walker, and she's zipping around taking care of the old people in her senior citizen center. She's still with me. She's 87. She was in like a couple months ago, repleting hormone therapy. So it really does. You said between the ears, and that is really where it starts. It's philosophy. It is the Tom Brady moment. It's the, how do I want to live my life? Do you have to do hormones? Do you have to do that? No, you don't. There's nothing wrong with aging the old-fashioned way. It's your prerogative. Ultimately, we're going to end up in the same place. Ultimately, we're going to be there for about 1 trillion years. So one could argue, mathematically speaking, there's no relevance to what we do in the moment. But I would argue that maintaining independence and vitality, they'll say to me, and I'm sure you get the same feedback, it's not so much how long I live, doc. I just want to live well. Yeah. And I know, the knock on the door will come, but I just don't want to have that prelude of, infirmity, and dependence. And this is a beautiful gift you give to the people who love you, the gift of self-care, such that you can give to others because they don't need to give to you. And I think that gets misplaced, especially with women who are such givers, right? I'm sure you've heard this. Well, I have to do X, Y, and Z for these other people, my kids, my parents, not to the point of self-neglect. That's counterproductive. That deprives people of their giving abilities. So, yeah, let's flip everybody.
Yeah, I love that. So much goodness right there in that. And of course, she's not going anywhere. Are you kidding? Yeah.
That's right.
All right. Okay. The name of your center, I had to come back to that from your bio, is Intellectual Medicine 120, literally the numerals, by the way, 120, to signify the 120-year lifespan. You really think humans routinely can live to that age? And here's the follow-up question to that, and that they will feel good enough that they want to.
Yes to both. Hey, if Tom Brady can win a Super Bowl at 42, Dr. Steve Petteruti can hit 120. It starts out with some biological evidence. So we know it's possible because it's been done. Human beings, in fact, have lived to be 120. Then we look at the cellular scientific evidence. There's something called the Hayflick equation. And Dr. Hayflick, God, decades ago, analyzed human cells, and he found that the human cell could live 120 years. Then you've got Genesis, for those that are biblical readers, that man shall live to be 120. It's a Jewish greeting, may you live to be 120. So you got this number floating around out there, coincidentally, scientific, biological evidence. The question isn't, can we live to 120? It's why don't we? And what can we do that'll give us an opportunity to get there? And the idea that we'll be there in an infirm state is false thinking, folks. You don't get there unless you have vital health with you. And the sooner you get started, the better off you're going to be. And what's happening in the science of anti-aging, and there's so much more to talk about, Deb, this is so fun. But the science of anti-aging is not happening in doctors' offices. It's happening out there in the PhD labs. Dr. David Sinclair wrote that nice book, Why We Age and Why We Don't Have to. He's studying mitochondrial impact on aging, finding that if we can feed mitochondria, we can alter some aging dynamics, including energy levels. To the listeners, keep your health intact. Great things are coming. You want to get on the anti-aging bandwagon now, so when the next breakthrough comes, you're healthy enough to capitalize on it. I don't want to be the guy that leaves the party at 10 o'clock. It's like I'm 78 years old and a new breakthrough comes through and they say, I'm sorry, Dr. Petteruti, you can't take advantage of this because your body's not capable. Remember Mickey Mantle's famous quote, he was known to be a hard-living guy. His parents died young. And he once said, if I'd have known I was going to live this long, I would have taken better care of myself.
Yeah.
So you got to be ready. Dying's easy. It's living that's the tough part. So that's where we got to be ready.
Yeah, I love it. All right. So I've got you here just for a little bit longer. I'm going to ask you the toughest question of the day. Okay. Is there a question I should have asked you?
Oh, goodness. When we have another chunk of time, you can ask me about intravenous vitamin infusion health support. This is an absolute breakthrough in health maintenance. We call it CellV. DRIPBaR is promoting this. It's not brand new science, but it's got brand new applicability. Folks, there's a difference. And Deb, I said this at the outset. Nobody listening to this show has health insurance. Nobody. What you have is sick intervention insurance. Nobody goes to the doctor just to get healthier. Nobody goes to the hospital and says, I feel great. I'm just here to see what you can do to make me feel even greater. That is our job. It's our prerogative. And with a combination of the internet making available to us all the science and information we need, and the outlets, including the work you do and the work that's going to be happening through DRIPBaRs, we can get to a cellular level of health. Why do people get heart attacks? It's decades of cellular corrosion. Why do people get cancer? It's decades of cancer cell division that's uninterrupted. Dementia starts decades before the symptoms begin. We need to get to real prevention, and that's going to be cellular-based support starting when we feel great. That's the question to be asked next.
So good. Yes, absolutely. We're definitely going to have you back. You've already bought yourself a ticket. So
Thanks.
it's been a great podcast episode full of information. Thank you so much. Where can listeners connect and get more Dr. Steve?
Well, thanks for asking. If you go to Intellectual Medicine, Dr. Steve Petteruti podcast, I do a podcast where I talk about these topics. Really, the foundational element of it is anti-aging medicine. They can also Google DRIPBaR and keep up with the propagation of the infusion centers. They'll be coming to cities and towns near them as well. So thank you, Deb, for the opportunity to speak with you on your podcast.
Absolutely. And listeners, I imagine that we stirred up some questions and curiosity and hopefully inspiration for what your next 5, 10, 15, and 20 and beyond years can look like. So if you have a question or a comment, please leave it below the show notes, and that'll be at flipping50.com/anti-aging. For the first time ever, I'm using that word.
Yay, yay.
What are you waiting for, listeners? Let's start Flipping 50 today.